Hey, what is going on everyone? Welcome back to the channel. In this video, we're going to be talking about Python functions, how to create them, and why they're used in our programs. They're very important in programming, so let's get right into this video. So what is a function? A function is a named block of code that is designed to essentially do one specific job. So you mainly use them when you have multiple blocks of code that are the exact same and they repeat constantly throughout your program. That is a time when you want to use a function. We've actually seen quite a few functions in Python so far, one of them being the print function. We also talked about the input function, and I'm not sure, I believe we talked about the length function as well when we were doing for loops. So those are functions that are pre-built into Python and they just come with it when we install it. But how do we go about actually creating our own functions? Well, to do that, we're going to type in def to essentially define a new function, followed by the name that we want to assign to the block of code that'll be contained within that function. So let's call this greeting. Then following the name, you're going to do open closing parentheses and then a colon and then hit enter. So now within this, we're going to place all of the code that we want to be executed when we call this function. So we're just going to type in print to use the print function, and I'm just going to say hello. Keep it real simple. And then all you have to do is come down here, and to use the function, we're going to actually have to type in the name and then followed by open and closing parentheses. And this will actually call the function above. So what the Python interpreter is going to do is it's going to run this program, come to this first line and see we've defined a function, and then skip over everything within it, come down and see, oh, we called that function. Then it's going to go back up and run all the code that's within there. So if we save and run this, and then if we come down to the terminal, you'll see that we have hello printed out. So we just created a very basic function within Python. There's actually a lot more that we can do with them. One thing we can do is actually add in what is called an argument. So let's see what that looks like. We can define a new function and let's just say, let's call it user greeting. Right, so we'll have our open closing parentheses and the colon. So an argument is taking in input from outside of the function. So if we want to take an input from outside of the function and use that input within our function, we have to actually define a variable. So let's say if we're going to greet the user, let's take in the user's name. So we define essentially a new variable by placing in the name of that variable in between the open and closing parentheses. So if we hit enter, we can do something like this now. Print out, we can say hello plus name. So if I save this, we can come down here. Let's just print out a blank line here to give us some space. But now we can use our new function, the user greeting function. So we type in user greeting, open closing parentheses, and you'll see that the interpreter actually wants us to place in a name here. So we can type in, let's say Alice, for example, right? So if we save and run this, if we come down here to the terminal, you can see hello, and then we have hello Alice. If we come back up, you can actually place in whatever you want. We can have a hello Bob if we wanted. Save and run this one. Come down, and now we have hello Alice and hello Bob. All right, so that's actually using functions with one argument, but we aren't limited to just using one argument within our functions. We can actually use as many as we'd like. So if we define a new function, we can call it, let's say, get pet. So we can grab the user's pet, get some information about it. So let's define a few variables to be used within our function. We can call it pet type, so we can grab the type of pet that the user has. And then if we want to add in more arguments, all we have to do is separate each one by a comma. So we can get the pet name, and then let's also get the user's name. Sweet. So we'll put a colon and then hit enter. So now within our function, all I want to do is just print out a few things. Let's just say, so we'll go user's name plus has a whatever they have. Then we'll print out the plus the pet type plus, and we'll do an apostrophe s, so if it was like a hamster, the hamster's name is plus whatever the name of the hamster is, so pet name. So we could save this, come down here, and I'm just going to delete the rest of this, and then we'll just use the function that we just created, the get pet, and then we're going to fill in all the variables, our pet type, our pet name, and the user's name. So let's just say the user has a hamster. That hamster's name, what's a good hamster name? Let's call him Mr. Fluff. Then we'll just say Alice. Cool. So we'll save this and run it. And if we come down to the terminal, you can see Alice has a hamster. The hamster's name is Mr. Fluff. Now where functions really start coming in handy is when you start creating bigger programs and you find yourself repeating code over and over again. Generally, you really don't want to do that, although you can, but if you find yourself needing to make a change to the code and it's the same stuff, you're going to have to go back to each instance where you wrote that block of code and change it individually. Where if you used a function, you could just call the function where you need to run that block of code, and you would only need to change it in one spot. If we use this get pet again, let's say the user has a fox. Let's say the fox's name is Hank, and let's say the user's name is Gertrude. It's a good name. So if we save this and run it, you'll see now we get this output down here, but we ended up saving ourselves a few lines of code. We would have 4 lines of code here, and we'd have to hard code in all these values. So functions, they make your code a little bit shorter and a little bit more abstract or variable. All right, so there's one last thing I want to talk about before I wrap up this video, and that is default values for our arguments. So a default value, to do that, all we have to do is type in equals and then whatever we want it to equal. Pretty simple, but you'll notice that we get a few errors following the default value. So what we have to actually do is include this at the very end. So we can get rid of all this, comma, and then we'll paste in our default value. So default values are pretty helpful for the user using your function because they actually don't have to include a value for that argument now. So we could do something like this. We could say if the user put in a pet name, or not a pet name, a pet type, then we want to run this code here. Otherwise, we want to run code down here. If the user doesn't give us one, so we'll just say username has a pet. We can just get rid of the pet type because we won't have it. And then get rid of all this. Actually, we don't need this anymore. Nice. So the pet's name is whatever the pet's name is. So now we gotta actually come down here and rearrange this because we have the hamster first. So we can copy this, move it at the very end. Perfect. And then we'll actually just get rid of fox. So Gertrude did not tell us what type of pet she has. That should be good. So we'll save this and run it. And if we come down here, we'll see Alice has a hamster, right? This is the usual output. The hamster's name is Mr. Fluff. But we did not include the type of pet that Gertrude has. So Gertrude just has a pet. We don't know what it is. And the pet's name is Hank. Alright, so I think that's enough for this video. There's still a few more things that you're able to do with functions that I'd like to talk about, but we'll be covering that in the following video. As always, if you guys have any questions, just leave a comment down below and I'd be glad to help you guys out. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more content like this. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.